We now have evidence that this market model is broken, and clearly what is needed is some dramatic structural adjustment in the USA. So let's play IMF. Now, in Argentina, they did try to use the 2001 crisis to push through more structural adjustment. But the problem, and the reason why this didn't work in Argentina, was because just a few months earlier, the IMF had been holding up Argentina as the model student. And they had already privatized everything. I mean, they came up with a list of more things they should privatize, but it was just like the ports, because that was all that was left. They had privatized everything. But also, the country itself had been very much indoctrinated in the idea that they were the model student, that they had followed the rules. And so it was much harder to sell the idea that you needed more neoliberal structural adjustment. And instead what you had was a popular uprising and a revolt against, and I think this is really important in this moment, against the entire expert class. The slogan in the streets, I think, is a really good slogan for this moment, which was "Que se vayan todos," all of them must go. And this was the period where they went through 5 presidents in 3 weeks, but it wasn't just the politicians, it was the pundits, it was the economists, and because they had boasted so much about the miracle of Argentina, they found themselves really bereft of the usual tools. Now, I think the United States in this moment, is experiencing something a little bit similar, in the sense that there is this consensus, and Obama has turned his election campaign into a kind of referendum on Friedmanite economic policies. I mean, whether or not he's actually going to do it, I think depends very much on the forces that we're talking about in this room. Okay, I want to talk about some short-term structural adjustments, okay? Kind of pressure that can be placed on Obama right now. Bob Rubin, Larry Summers have got to go, all right? I'm not just trying to make a popular point here. These guys are advising Obama on a day-to-day basis. When he wants to say that he has great people surrounding him, he talks about Bob Rubin. And that fantastic piece in the New York Times yesterday, which I never thought I would read, questioning the Greenspan legacy, was very effective in pairing Rubin with Greenspan at every turn in creating the crisis we have now. So we have a real opening right now. I think, if Move On wasn't Move On, they would be using their networks to be saying that these guys should be exiled, that they broke it, and that does not give them the right to feed on the remains. We saw the 2 political campaigns calling for, actually issuing a joint statement about the bailout, much to their shame. How about pushing the political campaigns which are both running on these platforms of getting the special interests and the lobbyists out of Washington, which, as we know, is complete bullshit. Get the lobbyists out of the bailout discussions. Okay, it is atrocious, and they're swarming on this right now. In terms of having a say that they should not have in who is eligible for the bailout, and also resisting change within the context of the bailout. These are the people who created the crisis we're in, and there should just be a blanket ban on lobbying with anything having to do with the bailout. And then, of course, we need to make the best of a bad situation, which is that they passed this terrible piece of legislation. But as Doug said, there is room to be arguing for equity. And I think it's one of the things that's incredible that's happening now is they're handing out no-bid contracts to the very companies that created this mess. The new frontier for disaster capitalism, as you know, I've been writing about this expanding economy, going from Iraq to Hurricane Katrina and just feeding off of it, the next disaster. Well, the next frontier of disaster capitalism is capitalism, okay? It's cleaning up after capitalism. It's a $700 billion industry and expanding. Okay, so just one last point to think big, because I'm thinking small here. We know that this crisis that has been transferred, that is being transferred from Wall Street to Washington, all of these bad debts that are now exploding on the public books are going to be used by the right, and that includes people like Bob Rubin, to argue that whoever the next president is, they can't afford to keep their campaign promises, okay? Yes. Think of this as Republican insurance against an Obama presidency, okay? And everything he's saying, yes we can, no you can't. You can't because we've just dumped this huge crisis on your lap. And Obama's already capitulating, okay? Huge surprise, but he's already said, well, maybe I can't afford some of the things like green energy and so on. We'll have to phase them in, all right? I've been calling for the nationalization of Exxon, all right? Because I think if nationalization's on the table, let's go big. Let's not just nationalize junk. Let's nationalize the biggest corporate criminals of them all, the people who have left us with the biggest crisis that we actually face, which is climate change, which is global warming. And now we're going to hear that we actually can't afford the investments to get us to address this crisis, to change course. That addressing climate change is a luxury we can no longer afford. This is the fight we have to win. And we can't nationalize them, because that, I mean, how would you tell the difference between a nationalized oil company and what you have right now? So we need to internationalize them. There needs to be an international trust, and these huge profits won by the oil and gas industry have to be the money that we use to transform to a sustainable economy. I know there's a lot of legal arguments that we need to win to get from A to B, but I think that that's a big idea that I'll just throw out there.